But like many gifted young women in the 19th century, she turned to poetry as a safe outlet, a feminine outlet for a young woman. And in fact, her own mother, who had died at the age of 27, also bearing 6 children, as Julia would, managed within her 27 years to publish a few poems herself in the newspapers and in the ladies' annuals, these sort of fancy volumes that were published every year for gifts to give women at Christmas. Now, in the end, Julia did publish several books of poetry, and she even wrote a few extremely unsuccessful plays. But the Battle Hymn of the Republic, of course, that was her real contribution to the literature of the age. And as she knew when she wrote her memoirs in 1899, I've written one poem which, although composed in the stress and strain of the Civil War, is now sung south and north by the champions of a free government. Okay, so one poem out of the 19th century, but that's a lot more than many poets get, and certainly more than most 19th century American poets got. And she deserves her place in history and her place on the postage stamp and so on, simply for that. Over 154 years since she wrote it, it's become a part of not only the American, but the international repertoire of music about heroism, honor, justice, mourning, certainly, spiritual mission. It was performed at the National Cathedral in Washington after 9/11. And one critic has said about it that the Battle Hymn has become the closer. It is the music that accompanies the end of great American lives. It was played at the funeral of Bobby Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and very recently Nancy Reagan too. And that was really extraordinary. I noticed that because very few women are included in the list of those who've had it played at their funerals, because very few women have state funerals, right? You don't really know about that. And in fact, although the Battle Hymn was played at the funeral of Winston Churchill, it was not played for Margaret Thatcher. So it's kind of interesting. It is identified, I think, with male heroism. On the other hand, it has become a kind of a meme, you know, kind of a reference point for determined women. And you think of the Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, for example, and there's also the Battle Hymn of Sarah Palin. Now, if you don't know the Battle Hymn of Sarah Palin and you have a couple of free minutes, I recommend that you Google it because it is unbelievable. Okay. And of course, it's also inspired the titles of a number of great American novels, most famously John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. She wrote it in Washington. You probably all know the legend. She wrote it in November 1861. She had come on a trip to Washington with her husband, Dr. Samuel Gridley Howe, and I'll be saying a bit about him later, and some friends from Boston. And that winter, they were staying in the Willard Hotel, incidentally, which has a plaque for Julia Ward Howe. That winter, she sent it to the Atlantic Monthly, and in February 1862, the Atlantic Monthly printed it on the cover, and they paid her $5. Within a short time, it was the anthem of the Union armies, and in 1864, it was performed before President Lincoln. And then in December 2012, the original manuscript of the song, signed by Howe, this is the script she had written out in the Willard Hotel, was auctioned by Christie's for $782,000. So it's quite an appreciation over time. I don't know who bought it. Maybe somebody will find out. I would love to know who bought it. Christie's doesn't say. But Malcolm Forbes was the one who sold it.